Welcome to a new episode of On Air with Farro Co. Today, we have an exceptionally enterprising individual amongst us, Martin Rowe. If you are an executive in Asia, it is very likely you've stumbled into Martin's content on LinkedIn. In the world of bad news, Martin's content on leadership is a breath of fresh air. It's thought-provoking and inspiring to many. As a quick background, Martin is an advisor to various Fortune 500 businesses globally. Over the years, Martin has done some pioneering work within the family business space. Martin is a distinguished fellow at INSEAD and has mentored over 650 plus family business heirs on succession planning, professionalization, and governance-related matters. Martin is also an advisor to the private equity and venture capital space in Asia. Martin, it's a real pleasure to have you here today with us.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. And thank you for making the time. You were just here for a day and you managed to come through for this podcast.
What don't you do for Farro Capital?
No, wonderful. Excellent. So obviously I've shared a small introduction about yourself, but we would love to know a little bit more about your background and a little bit more about your journey in particularly the leadership world.
Yeah. I mean, originally I was supposed to be a broadcast journalist.
Oh, wow.
I thought I was becoming a journalist back at that time. Played a lot of school theater, was writing. So that was kind of my first track.
Yeah.
But you cannot become a journalist in a very young age. So you need to go to business school, which I did at that time. And I had an accounting teacher, and he kind of encouraged me to go into marketing and pursue the way into business school. So instead of going into broadcast and journalism, I ended up for the first part of my career in advertising and marketing, and thought that the rest of my life would be advertising, brands, strategy, all of that. I stumbled at INSEAD back in 1998 for a summer course, supposed to be there for 3 weeks, but ended up taking an entire MBA.
Oh, wow.
During the year of 99, before there was a Singapore campus, as you well know by now.
Excellent.
And so that took me to INSEAD and then to Asia after that, because I had a professor that encouraged me to come to Asia.
Yeah.
So I took residence in Singapore in 2000. And then the next part of my career were very much helping the Asian firms to globalize, build brands, all of that. And so I spent the next 10 years helping Asian brands to globalize, but I also got into strategy and transformation.
Wow.
Over the years, I realized that a lot of my clients were family-owned, family-led, and that took me then into the family business and the family office space. So my career comes in 3 parts. First part was kind of advertising, marketing, very much from a European, Western perspective.
Right.
The next 10 years took me through strategy and transformation. And then, after years, you start to get into family business and the family office space. So super interesting, but you never know where life is taking you.
Excellent. No, wonderful. I think a very impressive journey indeed. Martin, usually I'm a believer that the construct of your life is really dependent, particularly, with the people that you're surrounded by, also by the circumstances that you go through in life. What is, if you were to share some of your professional and personal experiences that really shaped you as a person you are, what would they be, Martin?
I think first and foremost, I think we all say that our parents, because I think our parents have a huge influence on who you are, but also the cultural upbringing. And having grown up in Denmark in a kind of a Danish Scandinavian environment, where we leave a lot to kids in terms of what you want to do. We don't have too many constraints on all that.
Yeah.
So my parents encouraged me to not necessarily follow the crowd, because you're not going to be a standard in Denmark. You need to be an original. So everyone is encouraged to do what they like to do. So I think I came from a background where the space was open.
Right.
Go seek, go see what you find, try it, fail, stumble, rise, and go on from that. So I think from that type of background, that kind of seeded me into a life where I could pretty much become an architect on my own life. I was very fortunate to have very good bosses. They really formed in terms of that you can impact clients, that you can bring a very strong toolbox to the world, and you didn't have to fit into a certain system. So I think my bosses in the early years were instrumental in terms of also later on setting on my own firm, my own advisory firm, because I was given, even within a corporate context, a lot of leeway to express yourself, to become who you like to be, and to become an original without saying that you were an outlier. And that was really the launch pad of what I later became.
Yeah, excellent. And that is very rare, particularly in bigger organizations. The organization that you worked in, to get that much ownership, accountability, and freedom. So very impressive, Martin. There, when Martin is not a leadership coach, a business strategist, when Martin is not wearing that hat, what kind of person Martin Roll is in his day-to-day life, Martin? I would like to ask you that.
It's probably a better question to ask other people, but I hope all in all that I'm a good person, trying to live my life to the fullest. I enjoy sailing. I have a very good circle of friends, despite having lived overseas and on planes and in many corners of the world over the years. A very good circle of friends. I like to explore life. I like to see what life has to offer, and also hopefully have an impact on my private and kind of my social circles. It often interferes with what I do in business because I happen to be in many exotic, challenging places around the world. So part of my social life and my private life is also lived out because I happen to be in many places at the time. What I like to do, for example, when I'm back in my native Denmark, is to be in my cottage, be near the ocean, near the sea. I love to go sailing. Sailing is a big part. I learned it when I was 7 years old. And when you learn sailing the Danish way, which are very cold waters, we sailed almost all year long. We sailed small dinghies in high waves and all that. You learn to respect life. You learn to kind of take notice of the elements and behave after that. So I think sailing has always had a big place in my life as well. And I try to go sailing when I travel around the world as well.
I think really wise words. You learn to appreciate the elements. I particularly like that.
Resilience is a big thing, and of course, not to be a fool as well. That's an old saying, which unfortunately was taken out by the government. There was kind of a wording that only a fool is not disrespectful of the element, right? You really have to respect the elements. So don't be foolish there, because the ocean is ready to take you. And I've had my own encounters with the elements, and it learns that there are powers that are bigger than you are. So it probably learns you a bit of tolerance, a bit of resilience, but also to strategize.
Yeah.
In terms of the weather, the waves, the conditions ahead. And that's something I think that I brought into my own life, my personal space, but definitely also my professional space. And when I teach and coach leaders as well, you need to strategize for the road ahead. And you never know what kind of clouds are emerging in the horizon.
No, absolutely. I think one thing you said, and obviously you're way ahead of me when it comes to the leadership journey, and I could possibly learn a little bit on this front. I find usually the convergence between my professional and personal is very high. People that I spend time professionally, I end up spending time personally as well. And I think a good question for the audience is, where do you draw the line? Or do you need to draw the line in this world, Martin?
Yes and no, because something I'm sure we're going to talk about later, advising individuals, advising high-net individuals, business families and all that. Of course, you need to draw a line, because there are certain things in life which doesn't have to go into the professional space. Yeah. In my situation, also because I would say a lot of people know about me. I'm meeting a lot of people every year. I'm an educator. Yeah. I'm a consultant. I'm a keynote speaker. I at times have thousands of people in the audience. So a lot of people kind of they want a little part of you, that they know you. Yeah. But of course, there are certain parts of me, not that I don't want to share it with the public, but we all have different tribes. Yeah. Sometimes you need to preserve privacy and your private life for kind of the broader scrutiny. And why is that? Because there are certain things that you just share with friends. Also, different wealth levels, or different imagery. Yeah. Where sometimes the friends that you have is not defined, it's probably more defined by your values, where you met and you went on to do different things in life. So I think it's also good to have, I wouldn't say one private space, but several private spaces. But the lines can be blurry, because you meet people professionally, they end up being your best friends. Yeah. And vice versa. They could also be friends that then turn into an opportunity and all that. But you're going to be careful that you don't interfere between the two all the time, because then it becomes a little soulless at times. So try to divide it up. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think, obviously you hear a lot about, vulnerability being one of the biggest elements of building trust. But I think it's quite important to balance that. I believe in situations. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but you need to have your true compass, your true north. I mean, you need to have your inner compass. I think we live in a world where it's so easy to get swayed by different opinions. You're gonna look good on your Instagram. I'm gonna perform. I'm gonna be a top achiever. I'm gonna go to the best schools. I mean, everyone from very young kids to the most senior individuals these days. It's almost like you never accomplish enough. So we live in a pressure cooker. We live in a world with a lot of demands.
Yeah.
So I think at times you need to have your own true north. Who are you as a person? You need to stand with that.
Yeah.
And that's not always your professional circles that sometimes can remind you about it. You also need to have a private, trusted space where you discuss things. It could be people in the sailing community. It could be your friends that go way back to college and childhood. It could be your nearer family, all of that. I think it's important to keep various tribes. They definitely define you. And there will be a common denominator because, I mean, Martin is Martin. And you can't run away from that. It's not that you had different Martins. Yeah. But you just need to make sure that you segregate some of the tribes that you operate in. And this is also what life has to bring you.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked with in the private client space with many families, and some of them would really be the movers and shakers of this part of the world. What, Martin, do you think helps you build that trust? And then I will also like to share a little bit of my journey. But what do you think is the biggest builder of trust when you deal with ultra high net worth families? And, particularly yourself, you've mentored more than 650 heirs of, businesses. What is the defining factor that helps you do this so well? And what can people learn, who are listening to you, who are in the private client world, to do better, to be able to effectively engage and work with the families that they work with, Martin?
I think my upbringing, I think my background in Scandinavia, where we are very trust-based. In Denmark, you have something in psychology, sociology that you call power distance. What is really the difference between high and low in society? In terms of wealth, in terms of power, political impact, we tend to have a very narrow band of power distance. And that means that I'm very used to deal with people of all sorts, because in Denmark, everyone is pretty much equal, first of all, because of the tax system and all that. Yeah. But there's a society which has a high degree of trust. It's not, of course, it's based on legal frameworks and all that. So I think my values way back has helped me. Yeah. I often tell people around the world when I speak to media, and even when I engage with chairs and families and all that, that I'm not intimidated by wealth. What do I mean by that? It's a bit of a quirky statement. It is that I respect every dollar cent that a chair, that a family, like a multi-generational family have built up, but I'm not intimidated by it. Because what is the thing that you feel the most as a wealthy individual, people in power, people that are running multi-generational businesses, scale-ups, is that you don't get the right advice, that you don't get the brutal truth at times. Yeah. So I think that trust comes over time. You cannot ask to be trusted. Trust is something which is given to you over time. And I think I take it easy. You can't pitch on a family. In my advisory firm, I cannot call up a family in Germany or in Korea or in Canada and say, hey, Mr. Chair, Mrs. and Mrs. Chair, can I advise your family? It doesn't work that way. They will find you. It goes through word of mouth and all of that. And before they get to you, they want to work with people of high integrity, people that have their values, people that are independent. But when you have wealth and power in that cocktail, it's very hard for a lot of people to give way and take it easy, to be independent and to maintain your integrity, because you want to work with that family for a long time. You want to extract family. You want to do the deals with them. I'm not in the deal space when it comes to the families. Yeah. When I advise them on professionalization, on succession, governance, all those issues that kind of evolves over time for any business family, big and small, it's all about finding their particular journey. And you need to have an advisor who is clean, who is independent, who has a high level of integrity, which is very easy to state. Yeah. But you're going to have that behavior around it. Absolutely. And then I think you need to have a certain seniority to do that. I could not have done this 10, 15, 20 years ago. I've always advised business families and always been in the strategy and the transformation space. But when you really get to the end of it, where they trust you, trust is something that you build gradually over time. You don't even push it. Yeah. You might have a conversation with someone, and that becomes a client, maybe never. but often could take years before that client relationship starts to establish. But then on the other side, it could also run for a very long time, because once you get inside that kind of black box, the inner dealings of a family, they often would like to retain you for quite some time. For example, a lot of people are trying to push deals through me.
Yeah.
Oh, I know you work for these family offices, and you work for these rich individuals. You have access to all these 650 or maybe much more of the next gens.
Yeah.
Can you try to raise funding? Can you push this deal?
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, disconnect and become that kind of, I would say, like a cheap salesman. All respect for deals and financing is very important. Yeah. But in my space, that has to be truly, truly independent. Because back to that point, what is the trigger point? Business families are very aware that they need the right advice. They need that unbiased, trusted, sometimes brutal truth. Not that are going to make you lose face in a board meeting or in front of people. I will, of course, I will do that in a very gradual manner.
Yep.
Who can you trust in this space? Because there's so many people that come to you. So that trust is probably the most important thing, aside from having a good toolbox and those experiences and all that. And so you need to guard that. I need to have, from my side, from the Martin Roll brand, you need to have very, very strong, I wouldn't say 100% guardrails, but you're going to be very aware of that, because you can easily destroy it overnight.
No, I think some of the things you said, I absolutely agree and love them. I believe, in my personal experience, there has been really no replacement to sincerity. The second piece, which I personally feel is the biggest indicator of, you being able to build trust, is doing what you say and saying what you do, right? And I think that's always helped me build more trust with the families that I work with. And the final piece is sometimes, people can be a little too hungry. I think just finding the right balance of grace and being hungry is a good mix to have. So I think sincerity combined with doing what you say and saying what you do with a level of graciousness while still being enterprising and wanting to move things forward usually gives the right mix to be able to do things with these families.
But that's also why it's hard to keep integrity, right? Because you can easily get swayed by the money, by the fame, prestige, power, imagery. My very first client when I arrived here, 2001, which was a big company, and I ended up working for the CEO and the leader for almost 18 months.
Yeah,
we had met in Amsterdam at a network reception of all places, and he said, "Come to my office tomorrow. I want to talk to you." I sat in this big boardroom. I was new in Asia. I just arrived here, and he said, "Martin, what characterizes you? Why should I work with you? And by the way, Mr. Roll, in your chair," I was sitting in this huge boardroom. "In your chair yesterday were one of the biggest global management consulting firms. No names mentioned. Why will I work for you?" He invited me there. He knew that and said, "Because a lot of reasons, which we'll discuss later, but for one simple reason, as long as you want to work to me, I'll stay. If you don't want to work to me, I will be out of the door, and vice versa. If I don't like to work with you," I told him blunt in his face, "I will walk out because you don't need me, and vice versa. So I'm not here to sell myself for the long term." We ended up working for 18 months, but it's based on choice.
Wow.
So that feeling that you don't hang on to someone, that I'm also an independent spirit, an independent thinker, and if I don't like your values, your lack of integrity, your compass, your guidance, your waypoints in life, not that I'm going to judge on you, but maybe if it doesn't fit with my value system, I'm ready to walk out. And I have walked out, not in disgrace, not in a very negative manner, but sometimes you're just going to say, thanks for the party, thanks for the game, I enjoyed the ride, but you know what? Now I think it's time to separate and move on in different directions, because first and foremost, you're going to protect your own integrity, and that is so important. You're going to stick to your value system, in particular when it comes to business families and family offices.
No, I think with really wise words. I think one of the things which is really important, particularly for leaders in the corporate world, is to have a bit of a leadership brand, and and how do you build a leadership brand in general, right? So you need a set of values that you can always go back to, and that's the only way to build a consistent leadership brand. Otherwise, your impression in one room will be different compared to your impression in the other room if you're not sticking to the consistent values that shape you, right? So,
and that's also back to what my initial statement, which is, be an original. And dare to be yourself. Decide to be yourself. But having said that, dare to be an original. Dare to stand for what you believe
Yeah.
and put that forward, because thought leadership is not necessarily about just cutting people up. Sometimes it is about the brutal truth. It is about a statement about, I mean, in this day and age, there are so many things we need to change. And I think in my world, it's about chasing deltas. I tell my clients all the time, what is the delta that you try to close? If you don't know it, you should first of all try to define what you're running after. What are the deltas? You're going to chase deltas all the time, relentlessly. This is how you succeed as a leader, as a corporation, but also for family businesses. Some of them here in Asia are spanning centuries, are spanning generations. How do you do that? Because you're chasing deltas all the time. You always have that relentless drive to become better, to become more different, to outcompete, to have a percentage point on your cost or whatever it is, better leadership, better management, better governance, all of that. So it is so important to chase all the time, always trying to seek that arbitrage and close the gap.
I think one thing that really stands out is you're extremely self-aware about the person you are and what you stand for. And I think sometimes that really eradicates the confusion out of decision-making. When you know what you stand for, I think you can make faster decisions. Would you agree with that, Martin?
Yeah, and it's I actually had that conversation this morning with a leader from a 2B, I would say unicorn here in Asia. So
really?
Founder team, fantastic founder team, I must give them. But we had a discussion about when you have when you know a lot, when you come from that functional expertise, whether you were in finance, whether you were in entrepreneurship, whether you were in deep tech, anything, we all bring different capabilities to the table.
Yeah.
But over time, you're going to disconnect with that. It's a bit of this balance between art and science. We all start in the science area because you learn finance, you learn the tricks in engineering, you learn music, you learn things. But over time, as you become a leader, you need to become a little more art versus science. And one very, very important thing in leadership and in thought leadership is pattern recognition. Of course, you're going to dive that to the data and the point that can prove it. Yeah. But as you gain experience over time, because the more experience you get, the more pattern recognition that you see. And this is where you start to trust your intuition.
Wow.
I wouldn't say like an 18-year-old or a 30-year-old do not trust their intuition. They surely do, and they should. I was taught to do that. But over time, you're going to liberate yourself from the hangover of technicalities and all those kind of data points, because life has kind of taught you a lesson in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And often that intuition is not completely off. We know that when we step into a room and there's a person that you question. Yeah. You know that when someone is trying to sell you something, we know you see that intuition kicks in, because it's not only something you feel spontaneously, it's actually embedded down in your data center. But your brain and your heart works extremely fast to assess that. So I'm not saying you're going to go through life just based on pattern recognition and intuition. But it's important over time as you become a leader, and it is my job to elevate and to motivate, to escalate the leaders to the next level, is to teach them to listen a little more to the inner self and use the pattern recognition, because it's often you can hang on to that technical kind of background. But if you want to elevate yourself, that's about knowing who you are. But that's also about daring to do that. To say, this is what I believe. Because when you're in leadership, you are constantly challenged with roadblocks. People in your team, the finances, the board is pushing back on you, the market is pushing back on you, generations, the seniors, the patriarch, the people in power are always pushing at you, which is a good thing. That's the way we learn, we move on. But you're going to listen to yourself. What do I like to do? In this situation, 3 options. Are you going to go left, right, or in the middle? What are you choosing? And that's a daring thing. Leadership can be a lonely journey, right? And this is where you're going to bring yourself in. Dare to be an original.
No, I think exceptional advice there, Martin, and something that people can easily think through and implement and see some radical differences on how they're working. Let's get into a little bit more about your subject matter expertise, the family business space. As I mentioned, Martin is a distinguished fellow at INSEAD, and you've coached more than 650 next gens. Tell us a little bit more about that, number one. Number two, what are the key differences you see within Asian family businesses and European family businesses? These two things, I would love to get some insights from you, Martin. And a big part of our audience is actually next gens, as we spoke. So this would be quite meaningful for them. Yeah.
You're talking to me about something that I'm very passionate about. Of course, I deal with senior leaders, and the reason why I can deal with the next gens also because I used to work for the mom and dads and the uncles and aunts. I used to work for the senior generation, so that kind of almost catapulted me into the next gen space. Next gens are faced with a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities because why would family firms over time succeed? They will succeed because they get succession right, meaning who are the next gens to step up.
Yeah.
Secondly, because they renew themselves. So you're always going to be market fit. You're going to be right on your purpose, and you're going to fit to the certain environment that you're in. So that is a big challenge on the next gens because as you're 20, 30, 40 years old, coming out of INSEAD or for that matter, any other business school, as you grow, should I join the family business? Should I rejoin or should I do something else? That's a very challenging question. And for you and I, it could be a bit like, well, your mom and dad or your family has run this business for 3 generations. It's pretty substantial. It has big opportunity. It comes with liquidity. It comes with a lot of things you can do with it. Why don't you join?
Yeah.
But it goes back to identity. Who are you as a person, as a next gen? Because if I join that family firm very often, it can be a one-way street because it is often a commitment for life.
Yeah.
If you are the next in line, that engineer that got that exposure overseas, you went to a business school, you did whatever, and now it's time to come back. And then the senior generation would felt like they had ticked the box. But that raises a lot of question of guilt.
Yep.
If I join, am I good enough? If I don't join, travel with my girlfriend, decide to go somewhere else, pursue a different matter in life, I have that guilt too. And I'm trying to help them. I don't have all the answers, but I have seen, again, back to pattern recognition, I haven't seen all scenarios because tomorrow there will be another scenario.
Yeah.
But they tend to fall in kind of different brackets. And what I'm trying to do with the next gens is to give them a framework, a very wide open model.
Yeah.
To try to find out who am I as a person.
Yeah.
Am I going to join, not join in the business at the board level, or should I just become what I refer to as a responsible owner? So it's super, super interesting to deal with the next gens.
Yeah.
Because in the next gen matter area or the topic of next gens is very much embedded conflict and tension. Why is that? Because next gens, younger people, have always challenged the establishment, have always challenged mom and dad, and they should continue to do so.
Yeah.
The problem is in a family context, you're both family, but you're also business family. So the lines can be very, very blurry. And so sometimes that context, tension and conflict can spill into the private sphere that we talked about before, the tribe of your family, your mom, dad, uncles, extended family that we have here in Asia, for example. So that's why it's so delicate. And I think for me, mentoring the next gens is really a private, confidential space where they can reflect, discuss their private options in terms of joining, what to do, further education, deferred. How can we raise some of those sensitive issues about ownership, my mandate, my authority, my autonomy, all of that, which is always on the minds of the next gens. And I'm not here to take sides. I remind them very often what is on the other side.
Yeah.
Your mom did extremely well. I mean, your grandfather that later handed on to his daughter that happened to be your mom or your grandmother, they have done really well before you. So you also need to have a certain sense of tolerance and respect for what previous generations have built up before you without letting that stalling you, because you're going to be the one that's going to bring in and take that business to the next level. So it's this kind of balance between the reason why it's so tricky.
Yeah.
Because successful family firms is a balance between past, present, and future.
Yeah.
And we live in a world where we are chasing the future. It is always about tomorrow's technology, the next deal, the next client, the next channel. But sometimes going back in the past, values, integrity, the reason why grandmom that came down from China, she didn't have a dime, and she created what she created, sometimes gives us an understanding why we are here and what values that defines us.
Yeah.
And you're going to pair that with tomorrow. So past, present, and future in a very curated balance. So where would you potentially fit in? So I give them a reflection point based on business, psychology, what has worked in the past, what are some of the critical questions they're going to ask themselves and ask the family and the chair and other people. in order to assess whether to join or not.
I think it's there are a lot of parents who are listening to this podcast, Martin, and growing up, I had friends who ran family businesses, and they were really pushed very early into joining the family business. A couple of my friends never actually went to university, right? So what would be your advice to the parents, who run these conglomerates? Particularly, is the academic side able to bring a change that is important for the longevity of running this family business, professionalizing it? What would be your take on academics and education? Should these parents consider sending them to an INSEAD or asking them to go to a great undergraduate school? Because their philosophy is that the best way to learn the tricks of the business are on the job, right? So what do you tell them?
I mean, it's a question about stewardship. And the famous Patrick Philippe ad is always, you're just a steward of the current generation, which actually is spot on for business families, because you're going to hand over one fine day the business in a better shape than the stage where you came in. So you're going to spend your life, potentially 30, 40 years, to take that business and bring it to the next level. How do you do that? You do it by being better educated, by being more global, by having traveled more, by maybe involving more diverse teams, by employing more women in certain parts of the world, by somehow breaking some of those notions that used to define the business in the past. So the best you could do as parents is to start early, not by brainwashing your kids in order to join the business one day, but demystify why we are a family in business. What does it mean to be a business family? It comes with a certain humility because of the wealth, often our position in society, in local media, in the certain region that we operate in, despite being very global maybe at times. So start very early, but also set your children free so they can form their own identity, because you want to bring another original to the table one fine day. So make sure they go through proper education. Get them exposed to a lot of stuff outside. Try to help them to find their inner self. And once you become into the teenage years, into your 20s, don't start that discussion too late either. I've seen a lot of failures in succession, and 80% of business families do not have a succession plan. So first of all, get that done. But don't start too late either. I've seen a lot of families where suddenly they do come to the kids, but they have decided to become a medical doctor in London. They have married somewhere. They have other plans. They work for Google. They work for a consulting firm. That rightly so done other things in life. And suddenly here comes mom and dad and said, now we're going to talk about succession. But that was a bit of a taboo at home. So you need to have that balance between trying to entice them, to motivate them. You shouldn't pressure your kids into the enterprise. It's often when it comes to succession that we think joining the business is to become the CEO and the group CEO one day, which may not be. Just because you're my daughter, you may not be the best CEO for the job, but you could be an incredible person in governance. You could be the best steward of the family legacy. So maybe the daughter's job is much more that you try to help her, you steer her into the governance role. So one fine day she can be the chair of the company. So it's not about, it's good to get your hands dirty for a while, but sometimes that role as a family could be much more to become a long-term responsible owner. And then you employ the best professional people you can buy for money worldwide.
Excellent, Martin. And let's say there's a family who wants to engage Martin Roll on this subject matter. How does an engagement process look? Because, I think you're definitely a pioneer in this field, and there are not many people, who would specialize in such a sensitive, area. And obviously you've taken years to craft it. So how do families go about engaging you on this topic, Martin?
Often we have I don't have a set formula. So I work because I want to, tailor my advisory, my workshops, my engagement with clients to where they are. And they all have different needs. They are at different levels of sophistication. They might have done succession before and all that. So first of all, be an original. So try to kind of fit in. It often starts with a chemistry check. Okay. That's a phone call. It's a lunch. It's just a chat to see on both sides. Back to my point before about integrity in terms of where are you as a person? What is Martin's value? They need to see that as well. When they come to me, I find they have often done their homework. So there are a lot of things I don't have to sell. They have checked my background. They have spoken to other families, stakeholders and peers in the market. And then it often ends up being very long-term, but it starts sometimes with a workshop. It starts with a consultation. It starts with a couple of interventions with the senior generation, the junior generation, a bit of mentoring of the next gens. And then often over time becomes retainer-based, and that could take you for a long time. I do not require them to commit for a very long time. Back to my point, because most importantly, we need to like to work with each other.
Exactly,
we need to enjoy that partnership. It can't be forced because we signed a 3-year retainer and there's a lot of legal exit clauses. I don't have any exit clauses in my contracts because it has to be based on merit. It has to be because you're the best person for the job and you're the best in the market.
And I think the area that you specialize in is solving a real problem, particularly for Asian businesses. Because, Asian businesses are going through this sort of rapid growth because the world is moving east. There is a pressure to go international, right? And I believe things that you do, the governance piece, professionalization, it becomes even more critical when you're stepping out of boundaries, right? So what is your overall take on, Asian businesses going global? And particularly in that area, where does, your role come into play? And where can you advise these Asian business owners, Martin? Yeah.
The future is Asia. So we are definitely in a booming part of the world. If you were to, Asian family firms are generally younger. I think we are mostly in Asia dealing between the first, second, and the third generation. There are very old family firms. One of the eldest is a Japanese bed and breakfast, Hoshi Ryokan from year 716, 46th generation and counting. So of course you got very old family firms here. But Asian firms, because of the Asian industrialization, which has happened over the last, let's say, 50 to 100 years, are a little younger in nature. So Asia is still learning about succession.
Yeah.
Because don't blame the first generation. They have never tried succession before. They read it in a book. They spoke to the peers, so they need to try to go through that. A lot of firms in Asia find themselves probably between the second and the third generation. Now, that's also a very challenging spot to be. Only 3 to 5% of the global family firms would survive after the third generation because of lack of succession, lack of renewal, fallouts, conflicts, voids, economic tensions, could be a lot of different reasons. So Asia needs to realize in order to get above behind that threshold, it's super, super important to professionalize. But I think there is this hunger. There is also that motivation by a lot of next gens to come back to the region to participate. I see a lot of overseas students that would love to come back to the region, first of all, because there is growth here, there is opportunity, but there are also sometimes cultural factors that can get in the way. A key part of succession is communication. And communication is how we communicate between generations on light issues, but also on very controversial and very heavy issues.
Yeah.
And in Asia, there's a little more of a power distance. There's a little more of face avoidance in terms of the critical issues compared to, for example, my own background in Scandinavia. And I'm not here to force onto Asia how we communicate in other parts of the world, but this is Asia. You're going to deal with it. That's why sometimes succession can be a little more challenging in an Asian context. The role of being a woman in certain Asian cultures, for example, in Japan, can be a little more daunting at times. So Asia is moving forward, and I think Asia is learning, but it is also now ripe for change when it comes to succession, because a lot of Asian family firms over the next 5, 10, 15 years are going to go through that succession process. So it's also very important to get the record straight and get that model and framework for the professionalization and the succession issue, because it is not a given that's going to be a generation that's going to take over from you in terms of that stewardship. So it is super, super important. So it is important to make it attractive to the next generation to also be part of it. And they're going to be capable, going to be motivated, and timing has to be right. And all of that.
Martin, really exceptional stuff. I think very memorable, some of the things that you've said, from respecting elements to pattern recognition. A lot of food for thought for myself. What I want to sort of ask you is, obviously we see some beautiful LinkedIn posts from your end that we all like and share on leadership. What would be your advice to young leaders, who are looking to make a lasting impact at this stage, Martin?
don't follow the crowd.
Yeah.
We live in a world with a lot of conformity. We live in a world where everyone has to fit into a box, have the same grades, go to the same school, be like your peers, don't stand out, which can be very daunting. And again, back to culture and the different tribes that we discussed. It's a little harder here in Asia to be outside the box, to be outside kind of the social norm. But my advice to young people is to test yourself, to strive to be an original, but also in the early years to learn, to fail, to stumble, seek, try, test, and then you move on from that. Because it is not a given that your background in engineering or whatever you studied at school or you thought you should study is going to bring you to the place that you truly want to be. Look at my own background.
Yeah.
Photography, sailing, broadcast journalist, advertising strategy, and now family firms and family offices, and who knows what tomorrow brings. I think I will stay in I think I will stay in this topic for the rest of my life because I'm very passionate about it. But I would tell young people, work very hard to carve out certain specialties in your life. Study hard, work hard, learn from peers, learn from good bosses, learn from different platforms, travel, get exposure, be global. And of course, that can sound like a lot. But what I want you to do in your early years is to simply load in on a lot of different issues. Life will, timely enough for you, filter a lot of that. And sooner or later, by good mentors, life events, you will kind of end up in your right self. We live in a world where you're going to fit into the right self up front. But how would you know? Because you haven't lived your life yet. So it's a bit of a balance of trying forward and understanding backwards. So my advice to young people, don't follow the crowd, chase those deltas, be hungry, be curious, embrace diversity, be global, get out there and see what the world has to offer. And then at times, do a check-in on yourself. Where am I? What are your goals? What are you trying to become? What is it that makes you tick? In the end, I ask a lot of my next generation clients and all the people that I mentor, senior and junior for that matter, but in particular the next gens, and that will go for the emerging talents as well. I often tell them, when you turn 60, we're going to have a phone call. So I have a lot of people I need to call when they turn 60. I hope I live long enough for that. And I tell them two questions. One, was it a meaningful journey? Secondly, was it a happy life? You would not know when you're 30 or 20 years old, and you shouldn't.
Yeah.
But you're going to make sure that you take some choices along the way. And in order to end up in that meaningful space, I hope, it's also you need to taste life. You need to taste what the professional journey has to offer you.
No, definitely. I think something that I would personally like myself to check in when I reach that age, which is, I would say, a few years ahead of me. My final question to you, Martin, would be, what is Martin Rohl's mission in life, personal and professional, if you were to summarize it?
I would say on the personal side, first of all, seek and chase that happiness that I talked about, because you need to apply those kind of mental rules to yourself.
Yeah.
So live a happy life, have an interesting life. I am privileged in a sense that I've been working in almost all corners of the world. I have just taken on Africa. So I've been to Africa a few times and I'm returning again. So my life has been, I would say, defined by my global journey. I really like to live an interesting life. And when I one fine day is going to look back at what did Martin Rohl achieve in his personal life, I think it's going to be full of happiness. It's going to be full of joy, interesting experiences, because I am an experienced hunter. I like people. I like cultures. I like to close those deltas also privately. So that should be that side of it. On the professional side, I'm definitely driven of being on the big stage myself. Many people see my LinkedIn post and I'm speaking to big audiences, and I have a pending gig in South America in a couple of weeks to speak for a couple of thousands of people, which is, of course, very daunting and is very nice. And I get a kick out of it because you can distribute your thought leadership and you can hopefully impact talents and leaders. But what motivates me much more than that is to see other people succeed. It's kind of a very important part of me, and it's always been like that. Whether it was back of teaching people photography, teaching very early on people to sail, and then you see how the rest of my life actually formed out, become an advisor and a mentor and an educator. I love to see other people succeeding. So when you see the ballet dancer in the Royal Theatre,
Yeah.
dancing solo on stage, in the line, in the spot of the light. I'm standing in the dark, and I have great, immense joy out of that. Why is that? Because you know that you were that little dent in the universe that motivated her to take the first step, and finally one day she takes the spot and she gets the limelight. What am I getting out of it? A lot of meaning. It is super meaningful to help other people succeed. And that means that you're going to give a little of yourself every time you do that. And this is what motivates me to kind of help leaders, talents, young people. And I speak to thousands of young students every year, and I educate them and all that.
Yeah.
Super meaningful. And so my purpose is to help other people to succeed, because this is my currency, and it's something that motivates me. I have my own part of success, and I'm privileged in what I do. But if you can pass on that success to other people, I think that's hopefully a very meaningful life to have lived.
Seeing other people succeed is Martin Roll's currency. Very profound, Martin. And that reminds me, when I first got into advising private families, I was very young, 24, 25, and I went back home to my father, and I said, look, I'm meeting these exceptionally successful people. When will my time come? I'm a bit frustrated. And it seems like a really long journey. How do I move to the other side of the table? And he said something really beautiful, and that played a big pivotal role in my personal growth. He said, by the fact that you're able to spend time with these incredible people, life is telling you that your time will come. The fact that you're sitting down with them, their energy is going to rub off on you. And that really took me away from the natural programming of humans to actually start celebrating successes of others. And I believe, that played a huge role in a very accelerated progression that I saw in my career. So, totally believe in what you said. I think when you are celebrating successes of others, you generally find yourself elated and in a good mindset yourself. And it's very powerful for you to do well as well, to keep doing that. So amazing words. I'm truly energized by Martin's presence today with us. I hope you found this video podcast insightful too. As you know, Farro Co. empowers families to overcome geopolitical risks, build financial resilience, seize global opportunities through international mobility solutions. Check us out on farroandco.com. Thank you for tuning in. Wish you all a pleasant weekend ahead. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.